Christmas feels ancient, fixed, and, well, unquestionable. Most people assume it has always looked roughly the same. December 25th. Evergreen trees, Santa Claus, gift-giving, and a clean biblical origin. That confidence is honestly misplaced. What we call traditional Christmas is a stitched-together construction shaped by political power, economic survival, religious compromise, and, frankly, outright invention. If you study history seriously, Christmas becomes a case study in how societies manufacture continuity. For survivalists and historians alike, this matters, because it shows how belief systems are engineered, how rituals stabilize communities, and how myths can, quite remarkably, outlast facts by centuries. Myth 1 is that Christmas was originally a Christian holiday. The earliest Christians did not celebrate the birth of Jesus at all. Birthdays were viewed as pagan, even sinful, in early Christian thought. What they did commemorate was death and resurrection. Christmas only appears centuries later, when Christianity becomes politically dominant in the Roman Empire. December festivals like Saturnalia and Sol Invictus were already deeply entrenched, and abolishing them outright risked instability. The solution was absorption. This teaches a practical lesson. Dominant systems survive not by erasing rivals, but by repackaging them. You see this tactic repeated in empires, corporations, and governments to this day. So, myth 2 is that Jesus was born on December the 25th. Actually, there is no biblical date for Jesus' birth. The December the 25th date, well, it appears long after the New Testament was written. And, you know, it aligns suspiciously well with the Roman winter solstice celebrations. For historians, this is a reminder to always ask who benefits from a date being fixed. For everyday application, it means recognizing that calendars are political tools, not neutral records. So, myth number 3 is that Christmas trees are, well, a Christian symbol. You see, evergreen trees were actually used in winter rituals long before Christianity made its way to Northern Europe. They symbolized endurance and continuity, especially during those harsh, unforgiving winters. Interestingly, the Church at first actually opposed them, viewing them as, pagan remnants. Only later were they rebranded. This is a lesson in survival culture. Symbols endure when they serve practical emotional needs. If a tradition helps people cope with scarcity or darkness, it will outlive ideological opposition. Myth 4 is that Santa Claus comes directly from St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas was a real 4th century bishop known for charity. The modern Santa Claus, however, is a hybrid of Dutch folklore, British tradition, American marketing, and 19th century poetry. Well, the red suit was standardized by commercial art, not scripture. This myth is especially useful for understanding propaganda. Icons gain power not from truth, but from repetition and visual consistency. Myth 5 is that gift-giving has always been about generosity. Historically, gift-giving during winter festivals really reinforced social hierarchy. Rulers received loyalty, patrons received praise, and, obligations were quietly enforced. The modern framing of selfless generosity is honestly relatively new. The takeaway here is simple. Gifts are never neutral. Understanding this helps you read social exchanges more clearly, especially in times of economic stress. Now, myth 6 is that Christmas was universally embraced by Christians. Actually, many Christian groups actively opposed Christmas. The Puritans, for example, banned it outright in 17th century England and colonial America, seeing it as morally corrupt and, unbiblical. Christmas only really became mainstream in the United States in the 19th century. This myth reminds us that tradition often just means eventual winner, not something that everyone agreed on from the start. So, myth number 7 is that caroling is an ancient religious practice. Actually, caroling began as wassailing, which was, a loud alcohol-fueled custom, where groups would demand food and drink in exchange for a bit of goodwill. It was, closer to ritualized extortion than hymn singing. But over time, it was sanitized. This really shows how unruly practices are so often rewritten to appear respectable once institutions take control. Myth 8 is that Christmas has always been family-centered. For much of history, Christmas was public, chaotic, and, adult-oriented. So, the idea of a quiet family holiday, it really started to take shape alongside industrialization, when domestic life was, idealized as a sort of refuge from the harsh realities of factory labor. Now, understanding this actually helps explain why modern holidays carry such emotional weight. They were, in fact, designed as pressure release valves, giving people a chance to, breathe a bit. Myth number 9 is that Christmas food traditions are ancient and fixed. But, as we'll see, that's not quite the whole story. Turkey, for example, did not become dominant until it was economically practical. Plum pudding and spice foods existed because, spices signalled wealth and trade access. Food traditions evolve based on logistics, not nostalgia. This is directly applicable for survival planning. Diets follow supply chains, not sentiment. Myth 10 is that Christmas is purely religious today. In most societies, Christmas functions as a civic and economic event. Even secular states observe it, because it stabilizes commerce and social rhythms. This demonstrates how rituals persist when they serve structural purposes beyond belief. Myth 11 is that Christmas traditions developed naturally. Many so-called old traditions were actually invented quite deliberately in the 19th century, often to promote national identity, social order, or even moral reform. Charles Dickens Well, he played a massive role in reshaping Christmas into a moral holiday, one that's focused on charity and reflection. This really shows, I think, the power of narrative in shaping our behaviour. So, myth number 12 is that knowing the truth ruins Christmas. You know, understanding the real history of Christmas doesn't destroy it. Far from it. It actually strengthens it. By learning where these traditions come from, you gain the ability to choose which ones truly serve you, and which, well, you might just be repeating out of habit. For survivalists, and honestly, for anyone who wants to make their traditions meaningful, this mindset is absolutely critical. Conscious tradition is resilient tradition. Christmas isn't some relic handed down perfectly intact from the past. No, it's a living system, shaped by survival, power, adaptation, and, of course, human need. Once you really grasp that, you stop consuming tradition blindly and start using it deliberately. If this sort of grounded, evidence-driven history matters to you, go ahead and subscribe to History Reborn Alive. Share this video with someone who still thinks Christmas has always been this way, and, well, stay sharp. History doesn't repeat itself. It trains those who pay attention.